Haotoru was a lazy 200 IQ genius who lived a boring and introverted life. On his first day of school, he decided that doing things in life consumes too much energy, and if he doesn't have to do something, he simply won't. As he walks into school, he immediately gets put off by the students' high energy, contemplating how there must be others like him who aren't interested in studying, sports, or romance. Haotoru puts his shoes in the locker and heads towards his classroom, where he meets up with his only friend Satoshi and informs him about how his sister suggested he join the Culture Literature Club so that it wouldn't get shut down. Coincidentally, while checking out the club room, he came across a girl named Eru who had just joined the same club, and their first interaction became a mystery-solving mission due to her curiosity when Haotoru noticed that the club room door was already locked when he entered the room, but according to Eru, it was unlocked as Eru had entered the room before Haotoru did. While discussing this weird occurrence, they noticed Satoshi eavesdropping on their conversation, and he revealed himself after getting caught. After finding out that she was from the Chitanda family, he took out his notebook and told Haotoru that the Chitanda family was one of the few prestigious families in Kamiyama. Soon after, they got back to discussing the door mystery, and Haotoru started walking out after dismissing it as some kind of mistake. But Eru blocked his way.
もし閉じ込められたのでなければ、どうしてこの教室に入ることができたんでしょう。仮に何かの間違いだと言うなら、誰にどういう間違いでしょうか。ぜひ、オレキさんも考えてください。オレキさん。
He couldn't escape her eyes, which were filled with curiosity, and ended up solving this mystery alongside her. To start things off, Eru informed Haotoru that she had come to the club room a few minutes before he did. Additionally, she heard some kind of rattling sound for a little while as well. The three of them walked to the floor below to find out the source of that rattling sound, and noticed the janitor locking all the club rooms. Eventually, they came to the conclusion that the janitor must have closed the room, thinking that no one was present inside. After the mystery was solved, the three of them were about to leave the school, and Eru practically forced the two of them to join the club as well. On their way home, all Haotoru could think of was how he could avoid spending all his energy on something as useless as a club activity, and the only obstacle in his way was Eru. The next day, Satoshi told Haotoru about a story where a student visited the music club and witnessed a ghost lurking in the shadows. Even though they were not sure whether this story was true or false, one thing they were sure of was that this story was one of the 7 wonders of their school. Following that, Eru arrived in their classroom, and Haotoru asked Satoshi to tell her about the secret club recruitment note. The story was about how a recruitment note from an unknown club always showed up, and even though the executive committee always removed it, the note kept on coming at least once every year. The name of that club was the Joro Spider Club. Last year, even the committee president tried contacting the club using the note they found, but it didn't go well, making them think that it was a hoax. They believed it to be a false club until one day a student revealed his identity as the Joro Spider Club. He told the committee president to give his regards to the next president if he managed to find him, that is. Seeing how no one had discovered the identity of the current president, Eru's curiosity piqued. This worked all according to Haotoru's plan, and now he could ditch the club to solve this mystery instead. Their first step was to find the bulletin board where the club could have pasted their recruitment note, and according to Haotoru, the board on the first floor was their best bet. The three of them started inspecting the board, and Haotoru finally managed to find the note that was hidden behind the baseball club recruitment notice. Haotoru mocked the club members for not hiding it at a harder spot. Satoshi took the job of reporting to the committee, and all three of them decided to head back home. On their way back, Haotoru and Satoshi discussed how their plan worked flawlessly. Haotoru added the fact that he only went through this much trouble, so he didn't have to solve the mystery of the music club. Satoshi mentioned that he could have just said no to Eru instead of going through so much trouble, but that might have been due to Haotoru not being that familiar with Eru. Before they parted ways, Haotoru told Satoshi that the whole ghost story most likely might have been a girl sleeping in the club room, which the other girl mistook for a ghost. Satoshi replied that what he did today could end up costing Haotoru in the long run. A month had passed since that day, and Haotoru sometimes visited the club when he was bored after school. Eru, who was also present in the club, gave the idea of submitting an anthology to the Culture Festival in October. However, Haotoru refused to do so as it was too much work for someone like him. She further told Haotoru that the club advisor had told them to write one, and writing an anthology had been a tradition for over 40 years. Not having the guts to break such an old tradition, he agreed to make the anthology, but neither of them knew how to. To study the process, they decided to look for past anthologies in the club room but couldn't find even one. Their next step was to try and find it in the library, and Iru forced him to come along. Surprisingly, Mayaka was on library duty and she started mocking Haotoru the moment he stepped in. However, he didn't hold back either, and they kept on roasting each other until Satoshi arrived and called them a couple. His joke resulted in Mayaka getting angry at him, but he ended up apologizing afterward. Soon after, Satoshi introduced Mayaka to Iru, which reminded her of the anthologies they came there to look for. Mayaka told them that they could be stored in the back stacks and the librarian might be able to look for them, but sadly she was attending a meeting at that moment. Haotoru decided to wait and was about to step out of the library when Satoshi stopped him and asked Mayaka to tell them the story she told earlier. The story made Iru curious, and she forced Haotoru to listen to it too. Apparently, every Friday, the same book was returned. The odd part was that the library had a 2-week checkout period, but the readers borrowed it and returned it every Friday instead of taking their time and reading it peacefully. The students borrowed it and returned it on the same day, and every time, a different student came to borrow the book. Hearing this story made Iru curious, and she started asking Haotoru to solve this mystery, as she already had seen his skills after he solved the locked door mystery. He kept on refusing and was eventually enveloped by her curious eyes to try and solve this mystery. He started off by calculating the possibilities and thought that there was no need for the students to borrow it if they were not going to read it and return it before heading home. He concluded that the students were not using this book for academic purposes, but there was some other reason. Haotoru asked the others to give him some ideas, but hearing all their ridiculous ideas made him regret asking them in the first place. Afterward, he noticed that all the students who borrowed the book were girls. The two possibilities were that the girls didn't have anything in common, or they could have a group, and they sent a new member every week to borrow and return it. Suddenly, Eru noticed a peculiar smell coming out of that book, which almost felt like a paint thinner. This final piece of the puzzle made him realize what was up and asked Eru to go and take a look, as he didn't want to waste his energy. In the end, she forced him to accompany her, and Mayaka tagged along as well. During their walk towards the art club, Haotoru contemplated that as most girls didn't carry a huge book during lunch breaks, they must be using it during their class time. The only classes that the students from different classes could take together were gym and fine art subjects. Eventually, they reached the art club room and noticed the portraits of several people holding the book. That giant book made a perfect motive for the painting, and hence the reason it was borrowed every week. Both the girls were surprised as to how Haotoru figured it out, and he dodged their questions by calling it a stroke of luck. After returning back to the library, they told Satoshi about everything, and Uru was now most interested in what was going on in Haotoru's brain, which allowed him to solve these mysteries effortlessly. Later, they discussed how they had a great time while Mayaka seemed annoyed after being outdone by someone like him. Looking at the three of them made Haotoru realize that he could never be as energetic and cheerful as them, and he started walking away, but Iru reminded him that they still had to wait for the librarian to return. Concurrently, the librarian returned, and Satoshi asked her about the anthologies. But according to her, the anthologies were not present in the backstash as well. With that being said, all of them went home and enjoyed their weekend. Sunday morning, Haotoru got a call from Eru, and she requested to meet up as she had something to talk about. A few hours later, the two of them met at a nearby coffee shop and sat without saying a word. Eventually, Haotoru got annoyed and decided to leave, letting Eru know that he wouldn't be wasting his precious Sunday. She apologized and told him that she was nervous to touch on that topic. Haotoru joked around and commented on how it could be a confession of love. She agreed, saying that there was something she had to confess. Iru had a favor she wanted to ask of Haotoru. Apparently, it was a personal matter, and he agreed to listen to it. Iru had an uncle named Sekitani, and she wanted to remember what she heard from her uncle that one day. Haotoru seemed confused and Eru elaborated that her uncle went to India 7 years ago and went missing. Back when Eru was a kid, she was really attached to her uncle as he used to answer all the absurd questions she had. Upon finding out that her uncle was a part of the Culture Literature Club, she got interested and questioned him about it. However, for the first time, he refused to answer her question, which resulted in her throwing a tantrum. Eventually, Sekitani was forced to answer her a question and surprisingly, the answer made her cry. Even then her uncle didn't do anything to console her. It was definitely a weird occurrence and Eru started getting curious about the answer that her uncle gave when she got into middle school. The only reason she got admitted to this school and joined the club was to find more answers. She even asked the teachers if someone remembered her uncle, but none of them had worked there for 45 years. Having no other option, she asked Haotoru, hoping that he might be able to conclude something as he did with the club door lock and the library mystery. However, it was a highly energy-consuming task and Haotoru called his previous answers a fluke, asking Eru to get help from her other friends. Eru replied that it was not something she could just tell anyone and Haotoru apologized after realizing the seriousness of the issue. But they still had time according to Haotoru as high school goes on for 3 years. However, Eru didn't have much time as if it's unknown whether someone is alive or had met his demise for 7 years. They can be legally declared as unalive. As it had been 7 years since her uncle went missing, his family intended to hold a funeral, which is why she wanted to find out that her uncle told her as soon as possible. Haotoru didn't take full responsibility but reassured Eru that he would be keeping this in mind and would let her know if something clicked in his mind. Afterward, they all had midterm examinations, and when Haotoru was finally done with them, he received another letter from her sister, who is currently in Istanbul. Furthermore, she informed him that the anthologies were stored in an unused chemical locker. The next day, he showed the letter to the others, and they all tried to look for it, but the chemical locker was not present in the room. Luckily, Haotoru had already asked the club advisor, and the chemical locker was now present in the biology prep room. After reaching the biology prep room, Haotoru noticed a weird device outside but didn't pay attention to it and later realized that the door was locked. Soon after, an upperclassman came out and informed them that it was the wall newspaper club room. Coincidentally, Eru recognized him as Togeto as she had previously seen him at the Manenbashi home. After finding out that one of the Chitanda was here, Togeto started to panic a little. Eru asked him about the anthologies, and he straight out rejected their presence. Haotoru felt relieved and started walking away, but stopped after realizing that Eru might search the whole school if she could not find them there. All three of them kept on pressuring him, and he eventually agreed to let them search the room. After entering the room, Haotoru noticed that there was something that Togeto was trying to hide from them. To trap and force him to give up what they wanted, Haotoru proposed the idea of getting help from the club advisor to search everything from top to bottom. This made Togeto lose his cool, and he shouted at Haotoru, telling him that he wouldn't allow them to search the room. Realizing that he hit the bullseye, Haotoru left after telling Togeto to put the anthologies on the table if he found them. While they were waiting outside, Eru told Haotoru that the Togeto family had their fair share in the education industry and several people in educational positions. After 5 minutes had passed, they went to their club room and noticed all the anthologies sitting on the table. Mayaka was surprised to see what happened and inquired Haotoru about it. He explained everything starting from how Togeto acted wary ever since he came out of the club room. Additionally, the fan was pointed towards the open window. Furthermore, he had set up an infrared sensor outside the club room, which was supposed to alarm him if someone passed by there. Haotoru concluded that there was an odor that he wanted to get rid of, and the only odor that he would go to such lengths to get rid of would be of cigarettes. As he was from a family who had contributed so much to the field of education, he couldn't be found doing something illegal in the classroom. Apparently, the reason he didn't want to search the chemical locker was because he had hidden his cigarettes and lighter inside it as well. This was why he got enraged when Haotoru gave the idea of searching the room with the club advisor. After going through the anthologies, Eru realized that issue number 2 was the same book she found back then and asked her uncle about it. Sadly, she still didn't remember anything else, and after going through the second issue, there was something written about the previous year, which means that all they had to do was check the first issue. At the same time, Mayaka grabbed their attention and let them know that the first issue was not present among the other issues. On their way home, Haotoru commented that they wouldn't conclude anything without the first issue and how taking Satoshi and Mayaka's help might make the process easier. But Iru refused to ask for their help, which made Haotoru think that even if she didn't find the truth, someday it would be history to her. This statement stopped Eru in her steps, and she decided to take the help of others as well. The next day, she told Satoshi and Mayaka about this mystery, and both of them agreed to help her out. The next weekend, Haotoru and Satoshi met up with each other in order to ride together to Eru's house. After reaching her house, they were surprised to see how big it was, and Satoshi had expectations of servants coming to greet him, but was disappointed when Iru came to open the door. After gathering around the table, Iru started off by informing everyone about the things she found while researching what happened 45 years ago. She researched the anthology itself and wrote all the points that discussed the things that happened when her uncle was still a school student. The first point was that her uncle was expelled from the school. Furthermore, he was called a hero and later was known as a legend by the students. One surprising bit was that her uncle was the one who named the anthology Hyuka. Eru concluded that her uncle most probably fought against something in the school, which resulted in him eventually leaving it. According to her, Sekitani must have fought against the delinquents and came out as a hero, but none of the others were satisfied with this theory. Before Mayaka told her findings, they decided to change the location and sat by the pond to listen to what she had to say. She found out that the students and the teachers had a disagreement, which resulted in a so-called battle. The group of students was led by Sekitani. However, there were still errors in this theory, as well as the incident involving the student and teachers happened back in June, while Sekitani's expulsion was in October. After brainstorming for this long, they all started to get hungry and Eru offered to make some rice balls for them. Afterward, they all enjoyed eating the rice balls while Satoshi explained the things he came up with. Finally, it was Haotoru's turn, and he brought official records of the school's 50 years of history, thinking that there might be some sort of clues hidden. However, there was nothing noteworthy and Haotoru didn't have a theory as well. To get his thoughts straight, Haotoru went to search for the restroom. He accidentally came across Eru's bedroom and saw how much research she had done on this topic. Seeing her hard work made him motivated to use his head a little as well. After locking himself in the restroom, Haotoru started thinking about the stuff that might tie all the theories together.
学生運動、暴力行為、退学時期のズレ。45年前、関谷中。
Soon after, he came back and told everyone that he would be concluding all the theories as he didn't have anything new to add. After hearing that he might have figured things out, Iru jumped in excitement, and he started by reviewing everything from the beginning. The incident happened 45 years ago in the month of June while Sekitani left in October. The main perpetrator was the classic club president Sekitani, and the whole student body was involved. The students were fighting to protect their rights, and the reason for the incident was the student council. According to Haotoru, the students had that incident in June because they were negotiating their rights with the teachers, and the culture festival happened in October. The principal most likely had tried to shorten the days the culture festival lasted from 5 days to a lower number, which was the reason the entire student body was filled with anger. There was no violence included, but the students must have boycotted the school, which forced the teachers to negotiate with the students. Eventually, the school gave up on shortening the cultural festival, but as a result, Sekitani was expelled. Finally, the reason Sekitani was expelled in October was because the school had to wait and not rile up the students when they were already heated, which made them wait until the cultural festival was over, and when things calmed down, they expelled Sekitani. After he was done concluding the whole incident, Iru along with Satoshi praised him while Mayaka was annoyed by Haotoru taking the lead once again. For the time being, Eru decided to go with Haotoru's theory and use this story for that year's anthology. After they were done with the work, Haotoru was about to head out and Eru showed her gratitude once again. After borrowing the umbrella, he left, but Eru still didn't seem fully satisfied as she had no idea about the reason she cried in her childhood after hearing that story. On their way back home, Satoshi commented on how Haotoru had been going through all the trouble and solving the mysteries ever since Eru came into their lives. According to Satoshi, Haotoru might have been jealous of the rose life others were living, and he agreed. Back at home, Haotoru got a call from his sister. He told her everything about Hyuka and how they were writing a story about Sekitani in it. Hearing that name reminded her sister about the past, and she mentioned how what happened to Sekitani was a tragedy. Haotoru was confused after hearing what her sister had to say and requested her to tell him some more. Unfortunately, she had no time and cut the call, leaving Haotoru to figure it out on his own. This made him realize that the theory that he gave to Eru regarding her uncle might be incorrect or incomplete. He brainstormed for a bit and figured out that such a hero who sacrificed himself for the other students without any regrets did not exist, which made sense as her sister called the incident a tragedy. To sort things out, Haotoru called the other club members and told them that they might be able to fill in the gaps that existed in the theory. Luckily, they had someone who could help them out. Yuko, who was their librarian, was also a first-year student 45 years ago. She might have personally known Eru's uncle, and Haotoru had already asked her to meet with them. After meeting up with her, Haotoru showed Yuko the preface that she wrote for Hyuka, which made her realize the things Haotoru and the others were curious about. Yuko was curious regarding why the students were so curious about something that happened 45 years ago, and Haotoru informed her that Sekitani was actually Eru's uncle. To talk about things more in detail, she invited them to her office, where Haotoru told her the theory he came up with. She was astonished after hearing the theory praised Haotoru for coming up with something that closely matches the past. Nonetheless, the only thing Haotoru wanted to ask was if Sekitani sacrificed himself for the other students of his own will, and if he did leave the school with pride like a hero. Yuka started explaining the real story and informed them that the cultural festival date was shortened from 5 days to 2, which was the trigger for the protests. Even though everyone was protesting, no one could take the role of the leader. There was someone else who organized the movement, but his name was never revealed. Instead, Sekitani's name was used everywhere, and in the end, the plans to shorten the cultural festival were crushed. However, the students were still furious and went a little too far with the movement. They started boycotting the class and even held bonfires to show their ardor. Unfortunately, this started a fire in the martial arts center and the building was almost destroyed. The school decided not to involve the school and ended up expelling a student as a representative, who was the official leader of the movement, also known as Sekitani. All the students who supported Sekitani did nothing while it happened. Her story was more than enough to answer Haotoru's question about whether Sekitani sacrificed himself for the students or not. Afterward, Eru asked Yuko about the reason Sekitani named the anthology Hyuka, but she had no idea either. All she knew was the Sekitani had caught a glimpse of his expulsion order and forced the name on the other club members. Suddenly, Haotoru started acting all frustrated about the reason no one could decipher the message Sekitani left behind. According to Haotoru, Sekitani made sure that his feelings would be passed down to the descendants of the classic club as the name of the anthology. After thinking for a while, Haotoru asked the others to translate Hyuka into English, and the word they came up with was ice cream. He wrote something on the paper and handed it over to Eru, and reading that made all the past memories rush back into her mind. She started crying and told everyone that the thing she asked her uncle for was the meaning of Hyuka. In reply, he told her to become stronger and mentioned that if she were too weak, it was inevitable for her to be eaten alive. Hearing this statement made her cry because she was too scared at the thought of it. The work ice cream meant I screamed. With that being said, they started working on the anthology, and Mayaka worked hard on putting a layout and a timeline for it. Sadly, Haotoru was chosen to be the one who would be writing the anthology. Eru tried offering her help, but was stopped by the other members, who forced this task on Haotoru. On their way back home, Eru discussed how Haotoru eventually decided to write it, but it was less like his own choice and more like he couldn't get away from writing it. Soon after, Haotoru asked Eru regarding why she was reluctant to ask for Satoshi and Mayaka's help, but later decided she would. To which she replied that the thought of not remembering something in the future that she cared about that much didn't sit right with her. She decided not to think about it that way for the moment. After reaching home, Haotoru started writing his sister a letter in which he asked her the reason she insisted on him joining the Classics Club. If he had never joined the Classics Club, he would have never given a second thought about the way he lived his life. Haotoru figured out that her sister might have known that joining that club might change her little brother's way of life. Additionally, Ever since he found out about the Sekatani incident, Haotoru started thinking that his new way of life might not be as bad as he thought. The next day, Haotoru was taking his classes when suddenly everyone heard the voice of another teacher shouting, followed by Iru arguing with the teacher. Later in the club room, Mayaka was furious at Satoshi and gave him an earful. Iru constantly tried to stop their fight and even asked Haotoru for help, but he was aware that their attempts were useless. Iru kept on pestering Haotoru to stop the fight, and he eventually helped Satoshi out. Afterward, their discussion turned to how often the club members get angry. Iru told them that she had never seen Satoshi or Haotoru get angry. However, both Mayaka and Haotoru disagreed and told her that Satoshi gets angry quite often, but he didn't display it as obviously as Mayaka does. Moving forward, they had never seen Haotoru angry, and Mayaka mocked him for being a sad excuse of a human who can't even get angry. Satoshi mentioned that even though Haotoru's lack of emotion is something else, Iru's never getting angry is a special case on its own. Afterward, they started discussing the 7 deadly sins and how Iru had none of those traits. Slowly, their compliments started turning into them making fun of her, and she eventually got mad and scolded them. Later on, Iru told them that it was not a good thing to never get angry, and the same thing was with pride and greed. She explained that if someone never feels pride, then that means that they have no self-confidence. Someone who doesn't feel greedy won't be able to support their family, and there won't be any new technologies invented if people never felt envy. Iru also informed them that she rarely got angry as it was a tiring process. This made the other realize that she might have caught Haotoru's germs. Taking about the topic of getting angry reminded Haotoru of when Iru got angry during the 5th period. Iru also remembered that she had something to ask Haotoru regarding what happened, making Haotoru realize that he just dug his own grave. He tried running away, but Iru forced him to listen, and she explained to everyone that she got angry in the 5th period. It was their math class and Omichi was their teacher. Omichi arrived right on time and started writing down equations on the blackboard. Even though the equation was simple, he had included a restriction on the domain of x. Afterward, he asked a student named Kawasaki to solve the question and got angry when Kawasaki failed to answer the question. Little did Omichi know that their class had yet to learn about this topic, which resulted in other students not being able to answer the question as well. His rage only grew more and more until the point Omichi started yelling at the class. Eventually, Iru decided to stand up and confront the teacher, asking her to double-check the topic they were learning. The thing that Iru wanted to ask was the reason Omichi made the mistake in the first place. Once again, Haotoru tried his best to run away from solving the mystery, but was forced to do so. Meanwhile, Mayaka was surprised to hear that Iru was the one who confronted the teacher. However, Iru herself was not sure why she did it and told Mayaka that sometimes she even found herself hard to understand. On the other hand, Haotoru started going through the Omichi situation and realized that he most likely wrote memos to remind himself of the topic the class was on. Haotoru thought that Omichi might have confused the previous year's textbook and started teaching Iru's class from the topic written in the old notebook. However, Satoshi argued that the teachers get new notebooks every year, and a mistake like that was not possible to make. Apparently, Haotoru later found out that Class 1D had already learned the range topic while Iru's Class 1 still hadn't. Hearing all this made Haotoru conclude that Omichi might have not written that memo for Iru's class, but for Satoshi's Class 1D. As Omichi was in charge of all A, B, C, and D classes, he might have mixed up the A and D classes. Mayaka thought that it was impossible to mistake D for an A, but according to Haotoru, a math teacher had a higher chance of mistaking those two, considering how math teachers don't use capital letters but small ones instead. Finally, this theory made sense, and everyone agreed with this reasoning. This made Iru think that she might have gone a little too far while arguing with the teacher, but Mayaka reassured her that Omichi was the one in the wrong. Nonetheless, Satoshi told everyone to head home as it was getting late. With that being said, all 4 of them went home while Haotoru contemplated how one more day was squandered away. A few days later, the 4 of them were on the bus, heading towards the Zazen village, which was famous for its mountain hiking and hot springs. This all started when one day Iru asked Haotoru to go to the hot springs. After the bus ride, Haotoru was car sick and Mayaka mocked him for being pathetic, considering how the bus ride was only an hour long. Apparently, Mayaka's relatives had an inn, and they were letting them stay for free as they were in the midst of renovations. After arriving at the inn, Mayaka introduced her little sisters named Rai and Keo. After arriving in their respective rooms, Haotoru liked the view but still favored the vibe of traveling alone. Soon after, they were called to eat dinner where Haotoru predicted that the dessert was cheesecake and surprised Mayaka's little sisters. After Haotoru was done with dinner, he decided to visit the hot spring and met Eru, who was on her way to the hot springs as well. On their way, Eru asked Haotoru about her older sister, and he replied that she was an oddball and someone who was better than Haotoru at anything he did. The reason she asked about her older sister was because Eru is an only child and always wondered how it was wonderful to have someone there for them. After arriving at the hot springs, Eru was shocked to see that there were no mixed baths, making Haotoru go towards the men's section before he got any weird ideas. After taking off his clothes, Haotoru went straight towards the hot spring and found out that Satoshi was already present. After a while, Haotoru started getting dizzy and passed out, making Satoshi drag him back to the inn. They ran into Mayaka on their way, and the two of them left after putting him in the futon. Soon after, Eru gave him a visit and told him to join the others if he started feeling well. Meanwhile, the others were telling ghost stories, and the first one was about the inn. A long time ago, a customer arrived and booked a room, but didn't request any kind of service from the workers. A few days later, a scream echoed throughout the inn, and when people went to check it out, they found out that the same customer had hanged himself. The customer had embezzled money from his company and was on the run. After that day, all the customers that stayed in that room started seeing shadows at night. The ninth guest that stayed in that room suddenly fell ill, and that was when an exorcist was called as the owners wanted to stop any bad rumors from spreading. The next morning, Haotoru woke up and went to eat breakfast where Mayaka was also present and told everyone that she saw the shadowy figure in room 7. Mayaka was not the only one, as Eru also witnessed a shadowy figure in room 7 but told no one except Haotoru about it. Haotoru tried to dismiss it by letting them know that they most likely were mistaken, but that only raised Eru's curiosity even more, and she wanted to know the thing she saw in room 7. Later that day, Haotoru and Eru decided to investigate the shadowy figure and found out that the room 7 window was closed off. Eru added the fact that it was closed before she went to sleep as well. Having no other choice, Haotoru decided to go and check the room himself, and the two of them asked Keo for her help. However, she refused to accompany them, saying that her older sister would get mad at her. Before she left, Keo informed them that room 7 building was only used for taking baths and using the restroom, while the second floor was used as a storage compartment. Soon after, Keo came and called Haotoru and Eru for lunch. After they finished eating lunch, Ria came and showed everyone her new yukata. Haotoru and Eru decided to visit the hot springs afterward, and he was surprised to find Satoshi present there before him. He revealed that there was a shortcut if he slid down the slope. While taking a bath, Haotoru asked Satoshi if there was some sort of event last night, and Satoshi replied that all he could think of was the summer festival, making him realize the story behind the shadowy figure. On their way back to the inn, Haotoru told Eru that the shadowy figure she saw was most probably a yukata on a hanger. The yukata was hung there so it could dry easily, which explained the open windows. The reason it was hung in room 7 was so no one could see it being dried. Haotoru elaborated that the person who hung the yukata was Keo. She was envious of Ri's yukata and wanted to try it on as well, but couldn't as Ri didn't allow her to. This was why Keo secretly wore the yukata and went to the summer festival. Unfortunately, it started raining while she was outside, which resulted in the yukata getting drenched. Keo knew that Ri was looking forward to wearing the yukata the next day. Having no other choice, she hung it in room 7 so no one could see it dry, but unluckily, Eru and Mayaka saw it and mistook it as a shadowy figure. It got even worse when Haotoru and Eru started looking into it, making Keo think that she was getting cornered. Eventually, Keo put it back in Ri's room, and no one noticed the fact that Keo wore it yesterday. Hearing this story made Eru sad, as her idea of siblings was something from a fairy tale. All of them finally returned back home. The next day, Satoshi and Haotoru were on their way to the school when Satoshi mentioned how he had no talents, and it was unlikely at this point that a new talent bloomed. According to Hautaru, he was an actual database that had so much information. However, this information didn't help him in daily life, and no titles like Quiz King were ever given to him. On the other hand, he thought that Hautaru was a genius, to which Hautaru replied that Satoshi's observational skills needed some work if he thought of Hautaru as anything else but normal. Later, they arrived at the club room and were scolded by Mayak for being late. Soon after, Iru arrived and told everyone to go to the screening as Class 2F was showing a movie they made. Apparently, Iru had an acquaintance of hers in that class and wanted to hear their opinions. After they arrived at the screening room, Iru introduced Irisu to the other club members. Iru informed Mayaka that Irisu's family had known her family for a long time and she had taken care of Eru when she was younger. With that being said, Irisu played the movie, but Hautaru was still confused about why Irisu wanted them to watch the movie. However, she managed to persuade him to watch the movie and left the room, telling them to ask any questions they had after the movie was complete. The movie started with some members of Class 2F doing some research on Narakubo's history as they wanted to produce an exhibit at the cultural festival. After arriving at the point where they were supposed to research, they noticed an abandoned building nearby and decided to stay the night there. The students came across a map of the whole building and decided to look around. At first, they went to the office on the ground floor and found a bunch of keys, including the master key. They split the keys among themselves and decided to look around and open the locked doors while leaving the master key at the office in case of emergencies. After a while, the three of them returned to the lobby as they didn't find anything unique. All they came across were dirty rooms which required a lot of cleaning before they could spend the night. Eventually, everyone returned to the lobby except for Takeo, and they all decided to go and look for him. After looking around the building, they couldn't find him until they came across a door that was still locked from the inside. After using the master key to open the door, they witnessed Takeo's corpse lying around, covered in blood and his arm amputated. The other students tried looking around for ways for the suspect to run, but all they found was a window too high for someone to jump and a hallway that was blocked by furniture. This was where the movie ended, which surprised them as there was so much to uncover. Afterward, Irisu returned and asked their opinion about who the culprit might be. Mayak's first opinion about the movie was about how poorly it was made, to which Irisu replied that no amount of passion could overcome a lack of technical expertise. Coming back to the main point, the elephant in the room was that the movie was still not finished. Irisu explained that every deadline for the movie was met, and it was supposed to be complete on Sunday. The main reason they couldn't get it done was because of the script. Their class had asked Hongo, who had once written some comics, to write an hour-long script for their movie. Sadly, she was able to write the script till this point and ended up getting sick, not being able to finish the rest of it. Following that, Irisu came back to her initial question and asked them about who the culprit could be, as they needed to gather ideas and write the other half of the script on their own. All of them started thinking, but eventually looked at Hautaru, but he wasn't a bit interested. To remove everyone's attention from himself, Hautaru asked Irisu the reason she wasn't giving it a thought, to which she replied that she wasn't into the mystery stuff, which is why she just took responsibility for the project 2 days ago. Additionally, the reason she asked the Culture Lit Club for help was that she knew Eru from before and had heard all about the Hyuga stuff. Having nothing else to say but request them for help, Irisu started walking away, but Eru stopped her, letting her know that it would be too sad to leave the movie unfinished like this. Eru worked her magic on Hautaru once again and told him how curious she was. However, Hautaru refused after saying that the level of responsibility was too much for him. Luckily, Irisu came in clutch and advised Hautaru to take the role of observer instead. That way, all they had to do was listen to their class's amateur detective and offer their own opinions. Hautaru finally agreed to this proposal, and the four of them were on their way home. Satoshi informed them that the hospital near their school was owned by Irisu's family. She also received a nickname and was called the Empress, considering how cute she was and how good she was at working people hard. The next day, Hautaru tried stepping out to head towards the school, but changed his mind after witnessing the hot summer temperature. Just then, Eru arrived at his house and forced him to come along. They were scheduled to meet the so-called detectives of Class 2F, and later a girl came to escort them to where the detectives were present. Satoshi was curious about the people they would be talking to, and the girl replied that the assistant director, the prop master, and the publicity manager were the people who had taken the role of detectives. After arriving at their club room, she introduced the three so-called detectives who had their theories regarding the ending of that movie. She requested Hotaru and the others to listen to their theories and decide for themselves. Habatono Hiro was the prop maker, the assistant director was called Nakajo Junya, and lastly, Sawa Kaguchi Misaki was the publicity director. First of all, it was Junya's turn, and he mentioned how the location of where they shot the film was far away and took an hour by bus and train just to reach there. Mayaka started by asking Junya if someone heard about the villain from Hongo, and the only person he could think of was Yuri. Afterward, he tells them the ideal ending, which includes the culprit being caught and is forced to break down in tears after giving up. According to Junya, the culprit escaped through the window after committing the crime. Hotaru, who had forgotten about how the rooms looked, asked Satoshi for the floor plan. They reminded themselves how the only two places the culprit could have entered or left the room were either from the window or the room door. Junya kept on insisting that the culprit entered from the window and left from the same place after committing the crime, to which Mayaka commented that it wouldn't be a mystery movie if everything was that simple. Additionally, the culprit could have easily been seen by the other students who looked outside the window after the crime was committed. As his last attempt, Genya argued that Hongo inspected the house in May before the shooting, and there was no summer grass at the time, which was why she thought that the window escape was possible. In the end, they didn't buy it, as according to Hotaru, the culprit couldn't have risked exiting through the window, as the people in other rooms could have seen the culprit. Now that they had rejected Genya's theory, the prop master Tomohiro was the next one to tell them his theory. Tomohiro brought several Sherlock Holmes books and told everyone that Hongo used to study from these to write the script, which pointed towards the fact that she was indeed an amateur. He started off his theory and based it on when Hongo asked him for a climbing rope. This made him believe that the culprit would be none other than Kaunosu, who was a member of the rock climbing club. Using the skills she learned at her club, she could climb down from the second floor to the room where Keigu was present. She got inside through the window and after committing the crime, climbed back up along the same route she took. After Tomohiro left, Iru told everyone that his theory didn't sit right with her, and Hotaru also thought that it was not correct. However, as Tomohiro had not watched the movie on his own, he had no idea about how the windows were really hard to open in the first place. According to Hotaru, it would have been impossible to open the window from the outside without making any noise or alerting Keitu. Soon after, Kurako once again arrived and asked them how the interview went, and they rejected his idea as well. She also brought the script with her this time and handed it over to Hotaru. Following that, the last detective arrives, whose name is Misaki. She started off her theory after mentioning the fact that many people can't distinguish the mystery genre and the horror genre. According to her, there might have been a seventh character who was an unknown supernatural assassin. One by one, the supernatural assassin would eliminate all the students in the house until two of them would be able to defeat the supernatural entity. The story then ends with the couple who survived kissing each other by dawn's light. Mayaka was still curious about the locked door, but according to Misaki, a phantom assassin didn't need a key and could easily pass through walls to put an end to his victims. This time, even Iru was able to conclude that Misaki's idea was not something that Hongo wanted to portray in her movie. Mayaka agreed, as she was not sure how much of her explanation was a joke. Hotaru also commented on how Misaki's theory had a flaw, which was that Hongo didn't ask for props, which could indicate that she had plans to turn the story into a horror setting. Additionally, the bottle of fake blood she requested didn't have enough for the demise of every character except for the remaining couple, as Misaki mentioned. Eventually, Kurako once again arrived to ask about the results, and they declined her theory as well. On their way back home, Satoshi and Hotaru contemplated how they rejected all the ideas they had, which meant that they might not be able to complete their movie. After Satoshi and Hotaru went their own ways, he thought about what Irisu told him about how the outcome of something is obvious with technical skills, and the amount of passion wasted on it doesn't matter in the end. Just when he was thinking about Izuri, Hotaru noticed her standing in front of him. Hotaru had been invited by Irisu for some tea. At the restaurant, Irisu questioned the theories of the three members of the movie production, whether their theories were correct or not, to which Haotoru replied that none of them were good. She then calmly asked what was wrong, which was when Haotoru started to explain thoroughly. After hearing Haotoru's explanation, Arisu asked who rejected all of these theories, to which he answered that it was him who did that. Arisu talked about how when they first met, she did not expect much from him. Yet, he was the one to take down and bury all of the theories. She knew from the start that the three members who gave their theories were not of the right level, though she wouldn't say that they were each incompetent. Each of them had their talent, and this situation did not allow them to be of much use. Without Haotoru, she may have chosen one of the three and possibly made a failure out of the movie. There was one person Arisu could only count on, and it was Haotoru she was seeking from the start, not the classic lit club. She realized that he had great talent and was a special person. Therefore, after a short silence, Arisu asked for his help again, but Haotoru told her that he didn't have any such talent, simply saying that he got lucky. Arisu thought to herself that this answer was irritating. She started to talk about a small tale of a bench member of the track team. This member practiced day after day to become a regular on the team, yet she wasn't able to since there were so many more talented members. There was even one member who was called a prodigy, and her skills compared to the bench members' skills were like that of heaven and earth. She even won an MVP medal for her value to the team, and when interviewed about how she became this good, she answered that she was just lucky. Arisu asked Haotoru for his opinion on how hurt the bench member was upon hearing this comment. In some guilt, Haotoru stayed silent as Arisu told him that people must rely on their talents, or else others will think they are fools for trying. In Haotoru's mind, he wondered if he was special, if he was seeing himself for who he was. He wondered if he could trust her and came to a certain realization. After giving a deep sigh, Haotoru gave his reply. The next day, Haotoru and Satoshi were on their way to school during summer break. Satoshi saw it quite interesting that he was going there voluntarily and wondered if Haotoru had some business to take care of. Haotoru told him he did not need a reason, but Satoshi saw that it was out of his character to do this kind of activity. Haotoru told Satoshi that Arisu told him to find out who the murderer in the movie was, and Satoshi was amazed that he agreed. Haotoru made the excuse that he was a passionate and honorable man, which was completely different from his usual motto. Satoshi wondered if Eru converted Haotoru, but he replied that she didn't. Afterward, Satoshi, Haotoru, and Mayaka sat together to look at the movie clip once again. As they were watching, they couldn't find anything. However, suddenly someone came after Satoshi and threatened him as he was not taking his exams. After a while, Satoshi came back to give his notebook. Then Mayaka left for some work as well, and now Haotoru was alone trying to solve the mystery. Haotoru then set himself down to solve the mystery, accepting the weight the others had put on him. The last clue was provided by Mayaka, who pointed out the decidedly inept filmmaking, how not only did the characters fail to sell their lines, but the dramatic pacing was off, and scenes were consistently shot in a lazy way that failed to provide the most relevant information. Gathering this and all his other thoughts, Haotoru wandered through a wonderfully constructed dreamland of clues and deductions. All the film's various shoddy elements might themselves be an intentional part of the mystery. According to Haotoru's final theory, it was the cameraman who committed the crime, the mysterious seventh character that Hongu was allegedly looking for. This may not have been the actual solution Hongu had in mind, but it was a satisfying one, unlike the ones presented by the other detectives. It both fit with the information provided and, more importantly, felt dramatically satisfying. Therefore, Arisu stood up and told Haotoru that he had solved the mystery and congratulated him. She reiterated that he had a talent unique to him, and Haotoru awkwardly accepted her praise. She then asked him for a title, to which Haotoru responded and named the movie, What No One Noticed. A few days later, as a class full of students left after watching the movie, Haotoru got to unconditionally enjoy the feeling of exercising his gift for perhaps the first time, and even seemed shocked at how much he appreciated Satoshi's praise. But Chitanda seemed bothered by something, and Mayaka directly pulled him aside. First asking him about the creation of his mystery, she then mentioned something Haotoru forgot. the Dan rope that Hongu had specifically asked for. Hotaru's mystery may have satisfied all the in-movie rules, but it didn't account for every variable. Mayaka told Hotaru how the movie was intriguing. She also told him about the missing prop, which was the rope. Hotaru did remember it being mentioned and made an excuse that it could have been an unnecessary item. But Mayaka didn't buy it, since it was a fact that the story writer Hongu wanted the ropes to be part of the story so badly. Hotaru became slightly discouraged by this truth, but Mayaka tried not to make things more complicated by saying that she liked his idea. Even so, she still thought that all the clues didn't fit his solution. Hotaru agreed, and Mayaka headed to the Manga Society. As Hotaru walked out of the screening room, he wondered why he had forgotten this crucial element, whether he subconsciously ignored it or had changed the questions around to fit his answers. As he walked across the school bridge to the next school building, Hotaru noticed that someone was calling from behind, as he was in deep thought. When the person who was behind him tapped his shoulder, Hotaru surprisingly looked back, only to see Satoshi. Satoshi wondered what was wrong, but Hotaru ignored it and asked what he wanted from him. Satoshi had a question he wanted to ask, while Hotaru took note that it seemed Satoshi didn't want to talk about this around either Mayaka or Iru. Satoshi went on to ask his question, asking whether or not the solution Hotaru thought of was supposed to be Hongu's idea or just Hotaru's idea. When Hotaru answered that it was supposed to be Hongu's idea, Satoshi was disappointed. He knew very well that the solution couldn't have been Hongu's intentional idea. Hotaru worried that there were some inconsistencies he had missed, but Satoshi said that there weren't, since he thought the ending was truly interesting. He then asked Hotaru what a narrative trick was, to which he answered that it was a story that tricks the reader with the way the story is presented, exactly like the solution Hotaru had thought of. Yet Hongu, who had no background in the mystery genre, studied books of Sherlock Holmes only, and none of the Holmes mysteries ever used the narrative trick. But since Hotaru claimed it was supposed to be Hongu's idea, Satoshi believed Hotaru was wrong. Hotaru attempted to make an excuse that Hongu may have read or watched some kind of mystery-based book or movie, but Satoshi ignored this and told him if he believed this excuse was right, then he'd just go along with it. Though seemingly disappointed, Satoshi took his leave, since he had said what he wanted to say. Afterward, Chitanda confronted Hotaru and told him her thoughts about the case. She believed that Hongu had an ending to the script she wrote, but she didn't tell anyone about it even though no one would criticize it if that's what she wanted it to be. She thought that something was driving her into a corner that she couldn't talk about. Hotaru seemed very devastated that his theory was wrong and disregarded Hongu's feelings towards her script. Hotaru decided to forget it, but he couldn't get it off his mind. He started reading a book and remembered his conversation with the others on that topic. He looked up at the strength, which was supposed to represent him, but it was a mockery from Satoshi that implied he was so easily manipulated by women to use his full potential. But then, after thinking about it, he figured something out. Hotaru went to confront Irisu and invited her to a tea shop where they talked before. He asked Irisu what talent he had that made him special from their previous conversation. Irisu answered that he had a talent for deductive reasoning, but Hotaru interrupted her and replied that she was wrong. He remarked that he wasn't the detective but the mystery writer. He then explained that Hongu made notes which were assumed to be a list of tricks from Sherlock Holmes stories, but it was a list of stories where the characters lived in stories where the characters met their demise, which concluded that Hongu didn't care about tricks and preferred a happy ending, particularly where no one passed away based on how the list was marked. And from the result of the poll the class took, she entered a vote for zero demise for the movie, which confirmed that she wanted to write a script where no one passed away. But since she wasn't present during the shooting, the class went out of control and made a lot of additions, including K2's demise, despite the script not mentioning it. Hongo saw the incomplete movie to be incorrect, but couldn't bring herself to ask the other to refilm it since she felt guilty for ignoring the result of the poll. But then, Fuyumi came to her and asked her to feign illness and leave the script unfinished. After that, Fuyumi gathered her classmates and asked for their theories about the movie, but the truth is it was a script writing contest. But seeing their theories didn't work, she asked the Classic Lit Club to help them. In other words, Arisu changed everyone's perspectives of writing a whole new script to complete Hongu's unfinished script and used Hotaru's theory to replace Hongu's original script in a way that wouldn't hurt her. While spacing out in the clubroom, Chitanda asked Haotoru about what Hangu's original script would be. So he explained his hypothesis, and she would climb down with a rope from the second floor into one of the windows on the right side of the building and attack K2, but it wouldn't eliminate him, and then climb back up to regroup with the others. The seventh actor Hangu had been searching for is a narrator who already appeared in the incomplete movie, but he's not sure why K2 would lock himself inside a room. And then, Chitanda, who seems to understand Hangu a little bit better, believes after K2 was attacked, he asked Kaunosu her reason to attack him, and then he covered for her by locking himself inside the room and lying down on the floor. But Chitanda is not sure how he would explain his injury to the others. Haotoru added that there was broken glass inside the room, so he could explain that he got injured by the shards of the glass. But even so, they would never know why Kaunosu attacked K2 and why he forgave her unless they asked Hangu herself, and Chitanda seems to agree that it couldn't be helped despite how curious she is. This was all about our detectives. Will Haotoru ever leave his energy conversing habits? Comment curious below for part 2, and also let us know if you enjoyed Hyuka. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.